The General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU Zwelinzima Vavi, and the President of the United Democratic Movement, General Bantu Holomisa, convened a meeting with the warring taxi associations in the Western Cape to try resolve the bloody taxi war that has claimed the lives of at least 82 people. The violence has affected members of Congress of the Democratic Taxi Association, the Cape Amalgamated Taxi Association and commuters alike. Businesses in Cape Town have also been severely affected by the taxi war. To talk to us about the meeting and more, we are now joined by the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, Zwelinzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us.
It's an absolute pleasure, sir, having you join us this evening. First of all, just tell us about the purpose of the meeting and if you achieve what you were hoping to achieve.
I think so. Look, we had to respond to the news that kept on coming through about the number of taxi owners, operators, taxi drivers that were being maimed, killed in the most violent way. And this had been sustained over a period of time, in weeks and months. And we were aware of the various attempts by both the Western Cape and the national government to speak to the warring partners and to establish peace, but without a success. Soon, this wave of violence began to impact on other workers, particularly workers who were driving the buses, as well as the workers who were going to work. And effectively, there was a stairway in the bigger parts of the Western Cape, or in between, particularly Paarl, Bellville, Somerset, Cape Town. And we called them, and they agreed to meet with us. I think over last weekend, Saturday, we spent days with them separately. And we pulled them together on a Sunday. We met with them further on a Sunday. And out of all of those discussions, we now have an agreement, what we call a peace accord between the two taxi associations, Codeta and Cata. And that peace accord starts by declaring peace, declaring a ceasefire, and start by calling on all sides to cease shooting at each other and to rather establish a task team that is going to monitor this peace, and that is going to enforce it, and that is going to hopefully work with the authorities in the police and in the transport departments of national and provincial. And that is going to attempt to resolve whatever outstanding issues through discussion between the taxi association. The hot spot was Mbekweni, Bellville, and Paarl routes, which were closed by the department for 2 months. What we're hoping is that through now the fact that there have been no guns for at least some days now, we can convince then the MEC to review the implementation of that banning of the transportation between those cities that I've mentioned and give the peace a chance. So we're quite excited that that became the outcome of that discussion.
So when you speak of a ceasefire, Mr. Vavi, is it? Are you suggesting that all these parties are now agreeing that there is an agreement in place that would sort of quell whatever tension as a result of the matters arising?
By the time we came there, in our view, both the leaders of Codeta and Cata were quite keen that there must be creation of peaceful coexistence. There will always be competition, not just between taxi associations, but even within each and every association, there will always be competition. But we've got to manage competition better. We've got to manage the conflicts that arises better, and violence and getting guns can never form part of any solution. And they've agreed to this, and we're quite happy that they've agreed to that. And so the focus now is going to be about the task team that will be in touch with one another, that will make sure that the conditions of peace are established, and that there is monitoring mechanism, and that there is an enforcement mechanism. One suggestion, for example, that we put on the table is that the taxi associations themselves must agree that whenever there is violence or whenever there is a target, a taxi ban from any of the association, we will assume that the other one is responsible, and then we will put up a mechanism to ensure that the taxi that have been banned is restored. Whenever there is a death, we will assume that the opposite association is responsible, and we will then say that association, not individual member, the association itself must pay the cost of the funeral, must put some money on the side that will be put into the trust to support the dependents of the deceased. Whenever there is a shooting of a passenger in a bus, or shooting of the bus driver, or even shooting of ordinary citizens doing their business in the townships or whatever, then the associations themselves must pay for that. We think that that mechanism worked in the football fraternity. The reason why we no longer have hooliganism in Britain and here in South Africa is because the associations were now beginning to put internal mechanisms to ensure that they have martial structures, they have security structures, and even during the live football games, there are people who are watching over those that are disturbing the peace at the stadium. We need a mechanism of that kind, and we hope that that will not just be the Western Cape, all over South by all of the associations.
Now, Mr. Vavi, it would seem that this peace deal facilitated by yourselves is getting more traction than the official interventions, as it were, because a failed mediation by consultants that were engaged by the Western Cape government was also followed by formal arbitration, So it begs the question, what is it that you did apply, or what mechanisms have you employed that the official authorities failed?
We are not in a competition with the government or any other mediator that would have been appointed by the Western Cape government. We intervened because we were absolutely concerned about seeing two aspects. The first was just how many people were dying. And secondly, the taxi industry is the only business in South Africa that is totally controlled by black people. And we can't allow a situation where something that is controlled by black people will be synonymous with violence, with killings, with inconveniencing of not just the workers using the taxis. 60% to 70% of workers in South Africa use taxis going to work. It can't be that that such an important instrument in the hands of these black business people is now become known to be about violence. So we intervene not to compete, not to outsmart anybody, but to complement the work that has already been done by others. The difference, we think, was that these associations had a very deep respect for both of us. And secondly, we gave them time all day on Saturday to just listen and record their concerns against each other, as well as the concerns against the government. And once we have done that, we realized that there's so much overlap in areas of concerns against each other, and we began to isolate those areas before forcing them to make compromises that will make the ceasefire possible.
So which businesses have been the hardest hit by this violence, and what has been the impact of the violence on business?
Effectively, there was a stay away. And because when the taxi associations stopped to operate, not only because they were not allowed to do so from Monday this week, but because they were scared of taking a chance because the rate of killings and shootings was just something out of this world. So they stopped operating. But for some reason, and we don't want to apportion any blame to anybody, but someone else or groupings of people began to target the alternative transport to work, which is the buses in the Western Cape. The bus drivers were now being shot at left, right, and center. The commuters in the buses were beginning to be targeted. And once that happened, it meant that there was an undeclared stay away in the entire Western Cape. The entire business chain would have been affected, from your retail to your manufacturing. Even the kids couldn't go to school. And luckily, at some point, the schools then were closed. So there was no point of getting worried about the kids being killed in their only alternative means of transport. So it was absolutely devastating to the entire economy of the Western Cape. We're glad that it appears that for a week now, since the discussions took place, there have been hardly any incident reported. And we're happy. We hope that the taxi associations will in particular listen to what we were saying to them, that at the end, it is they, the leadership of the taxi associations, not government, not Vavi and Holomisa. It is they who must create the conditions for peaceful coexistence. It is they who must marshal and to discipline their own members who are prone to use violence to sort out differences.